do here is go back.
Welcome to the Butler Press Pass. I'm Perry Wagner.
And I'm Phil Torr.
We have a great show planned for you all today, including an inside look on Butler baseball and an interview with Butler softball head coach Scott Hall.
We're all looking forward to that, Perry. But first, to get us started, it has been a particularly light week in Butler sports with the baseball and softball teams just starting to enter Big East play. Coach Dave Schrag and the baseball team were swept this past weekend by the 11th-ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Butler was competitive in the first game, but a 4-run sixth inning by the Hoosiers helped them squeak past the Bulldogs by a score of 6-5. The Bulldogs sent ace Connor Mitchell to the mound in the nightcap of the doubleheader, which ended in a 13-0 beatdown by the Hoosiers. Game 3 of the series ended in similar fashion with the Bulldogs dropping their third straight game.
Unfortunately, some of the Butler spring sports season has been plagued by weather, including the home baseball game scheduled for this past Tuesday. They say the forecast should feature less rain in the coming weeks, but I doubt it. Press Pass's reporter Cisco Scaramuzza has more on how parts of the Butler sports calendar has been washed away.
It's a sound that's echoing through Butler sports fields. At 3 p.m. this past Tuesday, the Butler baseball team was scheduled to begin practice for their game against Northern Kentucky University. Unfortunately, as has been the case for many games this season, Butler Park lay silent for another day. As of today, 5 Butler baseball games have been canceled or rescheduled in the last week. This includes the Big East opener against Creighton, which was scheduled for the upcoming weekend. Butler softball games have suffered the same fate, with the whole series against Villanova being canceled, as well as games against Eastern Illinois and the game scheduled for yesterday against Evansville. While the rest of the spring sports have been relatively successful in getting their games in, Butler's Diamonds have laid dormant. According to WTTV, this has been historically one of the wettest springs ever in Indianapolis. The rain that canceled Tuesday's baseball game broke Indianapolis's April rain record, according to the National Weather Service, dropping more than 3 inches on the city in one day. However, it remains to be seen if the April showers will actually bring May flowers and if we see clear skies in the coming weeks. For the Butler Press Pass, I'm Cisco Scaramuzza.
The Big East softball season is in full swing now as the Bulldogs finished off their first series last weekend, taking 2 out of 3 games from the Seton Hall Pirates. Coming off an 11-9 conference record in 2017, the Bulldogs are looking to continue their recent success with the 2-game series against Creighton this weekend. Leading the squad is head coach Scott Hall. Hall coached at Pendleton Heights High School prior to coming to Butler in 2010. He guided Pendleton Heights to 4 state finals appearances during his time at the school and made them a top 25 program in 2006. Joining Press Pass's Sam Wiederhaft is Coach Hall live in studio, so take it away, Sam.
Thanks, guys. I'm joined by the 8-year head coach of the Bulldogs softball team and the man behind the 2016 Big East tournament victory, Coach Scott Hall. Coach, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So your team right now stands at an 11-17 record, 6 games under 500, not really where you wanted to be in the beginning of the season. What do you think has been the main source of problems so far?
You know, I don't look at it as a problem. We really scheduled a tough pre-conference schedule. We knew we were going to have some struggles early, especially with weather and facility issues. So when I made the schedule last year, I knew that this could be one of the roughest starts in my 8 years here, playing a couple top 25 teams and on the road. And, you know, so all in all, I'm pretty pleased with where we're at, to be honest with you.
So you mentioned a really tough schedule, and you've had a lot of tight games with 5 of those losses being underneath 2 runs or more, or less, sorry. But how do you plan on taking those close losses and putting those into the win column entering conference play now?
I think we just have to take each of those games and what can we learn from them. You know, tight games show you where your character at, where your team's unity is, and so it also reveals some weaknesses that you've got to work on in practice. So, you know, some of those losses were really good games. I go back to the Tulsa game. You know, we were 2-1 game with a top 25 team in the 7th inning. So the fact that we're competing with those types of programs, I'm really pleased with.
Now, a big bright spot for your team so far this year has been junior Jenna Foreman, the only player who's batting over 300 with a 415 average so far on the season. What do you have to say about her performance so far, just watching her throughout the season?
She's just a speed threat. She puts the ball in play, and she's a very tough out. Softball compared to baseball, with the shorter bases, we have a position called a slapper, and she's one of those kids that, anytime somebody's running a 2.7 seconds to first base, it's tough to get them out when they put the ball on the ground. So she's done a tremendous job getting on base for us and being a spark plug for us at the top of the lineup.
So focusing on the other side, you're pitching now. Your ace, Alyssa Graves, has been solid with a 1.76 ERA. Also, Caitlin Dowd just being named Big East Pitcher of the Week. But the others of Ambry Turpin and Gabby Schneider have not had the same success with ERAs over 5. Right. How do you plan on making that pitching more consistent?
Part of that is just the matchups. When we find time for them to get some innings in. We took a big loss with our senior ace, who was a big part in that conference championship 2 years ago, Michaela Boroff. She was out for her career this season. So Alyssa's had to step up. Caitlin Dowd, to be honest with you, I didn't even recruit her as a pitcher. But she's really stepped up and filled a big need for us. So coming into conference play, we really look for those two to anchor us. Alyssa's just had a phenomenal freshman season, but obviously with conference play, scouting reports are pretty thick. So everybody knows what everybody's going to try and do, and you've just got to execute better than the other team. So, and that's what it comes down to pitching is location. So we've got to hit our spots and play good defense behind them.
And one of the big things that hasn't been consistent this year has been the weather. You guys have had 5 games canceled so far due to weather. How do you make sure that doesn't affect the rhythm of your team? It's
hard for it not to affect our rhythm, especially the pitching side of it. Last weekend coming into the Seton Hall game, Melissa Graves did not have very good outings. And part of that was we had been idle for 12 days. And so you can only do so much throwing against your own teammates. So it's affected all of the Midwest, not just Butler, but it affects us a little bit more with facilities. We don't have the big indoor football facilities that we can go out and fully scrimmage in. So, we make the best with what we have, and we're battling again this weekend. There's some series that are probably going to get canceled this weekend. So we're fighting the elements like everybody else.
You mentioned the series against Seton Hall. You guys won that series 2-1. Those were your only conference games so far. How do you see this team improving throughout conference play?
That's what we really focus on. I know the overall win-loss records sometimes don't look so great, but you look, we've finished in the top 4 ever since we've been in the Big East, and so that's what we really focus on. So losing the Villanova series due to weather hurt us. We felt like that's a series we really could have been competitive in, and then coming into Seton Hall, and again not being able to play on our home field, we had to go up to Grand Park and play, which has been really good to us. Using that as a springboard, Game 3 wasn't so great with Seton Hall, a 1-0 loss. But we went back, reviewed some at-bats, reviewed some situations that we need to improve on, and hopefully this weekend against Creighton we can improve upon that.
You mentioned in-conference success being in the top 4 every single year in the Big East, but focusing on yourself, you've taken this team through a lot of transition through different conferences, but with the overall record, you've kind of hovered around that 500 line, being a few games under it, a few games over it from season to season. But what do you think has been preventing your team from kind of taking that jump and being one of the elite programs?
I think there's a lot of things that people can look at, and when you look at mid-majors, we battle a lot of things that don't necessarily come into play in win and loss record when you talk about funding and facilities and things like that. But all in all, I'm very pleased with where our program's at right now. We're competing in the Big East. We've went through 3 different conference changes since I've been here, and so finally making that adjustment to the Big East. We focus completely on conference play, and the early schedules, sometimes don't go in our favor with having to play a bunch of Power 5 schools. But as long as we can compete in those games, I don't really focus on win-loss record pre-conference.
And finally, Coach, 11 wins, 17 losses right now, but very good attitude going into conference play. What's the goal for the end of the season?
Every year, our first goal is get into the conference tournament and then win the conference tournament. So that's our focus from day one, to try and give ourselves the best shot at winning a conference championship and getting the NCAA tournament.
All right, guys, that's Coach Scott Hall. Coach, good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Guys, back to you.
Thank you, Sam. Now we welcome on Press Pass reporter Kelsey Casper. Kelsey, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Perry, we're going to start with you. Softball team has jumped out to an 11-17 record thus far this season. What have been the areas in which they've struggled the most?
Yep. Well, the Big East Conference as a whole averages about 15 home runs per team, and Butler is at the lower scale of that with just 4. Caitlin Dowd has 3. Alyssa Lack has 1, which aren't exactly numbers that jump off the screen. And so the problem is that both of their averages sit under 235. So what you'd like to see is either they need to start hitting more home runs or they need to get that average up to at least the 260 range. And on the pitching side, that first half of their rotation has been really, really well, played really, really well. The second half, both of their ERAs are above 6, Turpin and Schneider, which is troublesome because pitching is going to have to lead this team in a couple of conference games.
Absolutely. Starting pitching, definitely an issue with keeping runs off the board. So, Kelsey, what players need to step up on the offensive side to keep the Bulldogs in these games?
Well, Phil, I think offense is one of the main concerns of this team. The bats haven't been generally too hot this season. They need to step up in order to support those pitchers who have been struggling a little bit. But specifically, I think players like senior Sarah Dixon need to start stepping up. She's currently hitting 157 on the season, but last year she finished with a 331 and with 27 RBIs. So definitely getting out to a slow start, but we know she's a player who has plenty of potential. She just needs to get out of the slump that she's having and get her bats rolling.
Absolutely. When you look at the roster, this team one full of underclassmen talent. So what players have stepped up the most this season, and what players can they look to rely on moving forward?
I look at Alyssa Garcia and Christina Candati, who are 2 sophomores who have absolutely stepped it up for Coach Hall this season. Garcia, while she only has 2 RBIs, has a 286 average and is second on the team in hits, while Candati has those 9 RBIs on the season. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception, you guys, that hits are the only way that you can make an impact and score runs. And while some of that is true, I think there is something to be said about having good plate discipline and getting walks. Both Candati and Garcia lead the team with 7 walks on this season. I think that's a big thing that people are sleeping on.
Well, Perry, I think the obvious answer is freshman pitcher Alyssa Graves. She's having an outstanding season. She leads the team with 71.9 innings pitched and with an ERA of 1.76. So definitely adjusting to this position as a freshman and will be an asset to this team for the next 3 years.
Absolutely. This is a team that's just going to keep improving as the season goes along. So how do you think the Bulldogs are going to perform now that they're entering Big East play?
Well, looking at the record right now doesn't give a good representation of how they will compete come conference play because of how competitive the non-conference schedule was. They played teams like Texas A&M, North Carolina, Iowa, teams in very competitive softball conferences. And looking at the Big East, not a very big softball conference. They already went 2-1 against the Seton Hall Pirates, so I think it's very promising, and I think they're going to beat a lot of expectations come conference play.
Yeah, like Kelsey said, the Big East historically isn't a very strong conference, and historically Coach Hall does really well against the Big East. Last year, this team ended under 500, but their conference record was 11-9, so they do really well in conference play. And if you look back 2 years ago when they won that Big East tournament, they weren't the best team in the Big East, but they became the best team in the Big East in conference play and in the conference tournament.
Yeah, this team still has plenty of time left in the season to turn around. Kelsey, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next up, each week we highlight the top players or plays from the week in Butler sports. Keelan Martin has more with this week's Top Dog Moment.
I'm Keelan Martin, and here are this week's Top Dog Moments. Starting at number 2 is Butler women's lacrosse. Freshman attacker Morgan Page scored the 3rd goal of Wednesday's match against the Marquette Golden Eagles. The Dogs fell short with a score of 19-3. Finishing at number 1 is junior pitcher Caitlin Dowd, who was named Big East Pitcher of the Week. Dowd finished the weekend with a 1.0 ERA, 3 strikeouts, and 0 base hits allowed. The Bulldogs swept a doubleheader on Friday but lost 1-0 to the Seton Hall Pirates. The Bulldogs are now 2-1 in Big East play.
Thank you, Keelan, and that was this week's Top Dog Moments. And that's all the time we have left for you today on the Press Pass. For the rest of our team, I'm Phil Torr.
And I'm Perry Wagner. We have our credentials. Now you have yours. We'll see you next time.